Welcome to NEK VT Rocks, and my guest today is David Zuckerman. He is probably best known for his role as the Lieutenant Governor, except right now he's known for a lot more things. David, thank you for doing this.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm really glad to be here. And in the new virtual world, you can get all over the state pretty fast.
It's pretty amazing. It's still a little weird for me doing it over Zoom. You have way more practice with this than I do. So I'm going to bow to your greater wisdom with it. We're keeping the focus on the NEK because that's where we live up here. And we tend to think of ourselves up here as a sacrifice zone. We have some really good reasons for seeing ourselves in that way because that's the message we get from the outside. And we've just had a reinforcement of that message, as you're, I'm sure, really well aware, with the threat to close our colleges. So I know you're super involved with that. Tell us what's happening.
Well, it's been a remarkable week, to be perfectly honest. Apparently, of course, the board has maybe been talking about some sort of ideas and some of the challenges for the state colleges. Well, they've been talking about the challenges for years. And I do have to say, Chancellor Spalding has been talking about the financial shortfalls for many years and coming to the legislature to try to get help with those shortfalls. And we know that the state colleges are woefully underfunded, and that's been a gradual shift to the bottom, Vermont being one of the lowest funding states of our state colleges of any in the country, really over the last 30 or 40 years. And I think there's a lot to be talked about there. Much of this has happened over the same 40 years that Reaganomics has happened, and wealthier people have paid less in taxes, and therefore people at the state levels have been getting less, the state governments have been getting less money from the federal government for all kinds of programs, which means it falls to the state. And Vermont is one of the poorest states in New England. In fact, it is the poorest state in New England. We don't have a major city. We don't have coastline where a lot of economic activity happens in this country. And so on the competing priorities, state colleges have gotten less and less funding. So that the chancellor is accurate, very much so with that. The other side of the coin is that the education system across this country has been shifting from online learning to the fact that there's fewer students, both from the country as well as from out of the country for the last 3 years. Under this president, fewer folks have been coming to the United States to go to higher education, which means all the colleges and universities are competing for a smaller pool of students. We've already seen 3 small colleges, private colleges in Vermont, close because of these various challenges. So it's not just the state funding issue, it's also how are these colleges and or this, in this case, the state colleges adjusting to the new times. And so there's blame to be put all the way around appropriately. And the question is now, what do we do going forward? Because last Friday, of course, it became public, the chancellor recommending to the board to close NVU Johnson, NVU Linden, and Vermont Technical College in Randolph, 3 of the 4 residential campuses in the state college system. And I have to say, this was the fastest, largest organic public outcry on any issue that I have seen in my 22 years of public service. And that's saying a lot. I've been here through civil unions and marriage equality, through raising minimum wage issues and others. And there were lots of people involved in all of those, but those momentums built. This was in 5 days. There have been 25,000 petition signatures. There was the drive-by rally of the State House and the state college system on Monday. There were statements put out by the President Pro Tem and the Speaker together on Sunday, followed by the governor's statement. And during my press conference at 3:30, it was announced that they would postpone that vote and not have it on Monday, the trustees, to close the school.
Welcome.
And then Wednesday, just yesterday, I'm almost done, sorry, the chancellor withdrew his proposal. So right now where we are is everybody is hyper aware and hyper organized around saving our state colleges. And now, instead of looking back, as I gave some of the history, we have to look forward and start thinking, what does saving the state colleges mean? What resources exist in the state, which is not many, although maybe there are resources within the federal sort of recovery package. but also what resources can or should be shifted from other parts of state government. That's always a very hard conversation.
Mhm.
Or what other resources should be generated through marginal taxes or other taxes, whether it's only on the wealthiest or it's everybody, to generate the revenues, because we're talking about a multi-year, multi-million, if not 10 plus million per year need on top of the 25 million that's being talked about right now. And those are very, very big numbers in Vermont's budgetary standards. And so it's going to take creative minds and ideas. And I'll just wrap, Pam, sorry, with a few that I've heard about from people. I've heard from alumni all over the country saying, I keep calling the state colleges saying, send me promotional materials. I live in such and such Texas or such and such, Pennsylvania. I will go to high schools and help recruit students. Others saying, I've gotten successful in my life because I went to Linden State. I would like to help contribute to an endowment. Why have we not built an endowment for the last 20 or 30 years? We have thousands of alumni. Even small contributions add up, and maybe those could have helped. What kind of issues in terms of coursework arenas could be gone into to attract students? There's a national nursing shortage. There's dental hygienist shortages. Maybe those are some avenues to teach so that we could keep Vermonters and get them trained up for new jobs that are wanting, or attract people from out of state. So that's a big opening, Pam, but I just wanted to paint. You said what's
Hey,
going on, and it's a big deal. So
I asked the question,
yeah,
and it's important. I'm slightly amused at how surprised you appear to be that it took off so fast. That's
I'm not
the good thing.
surprised. I'm not surprised. I'm just stating that it did take on that.
Yeah, that is social media at its best. And some of the people who jumped into this from the beginning, specifically one person who lives up here, Ben Luce, he knew how to use social media in the most effective way. And we're all learning from that. And I'm assuming that that's the way we can continue to keep this issue moving forward. Because up here, the loss of those colleges would be absolutely devastating. And
No doubt.
we have to look at I hear the big numbers and how scary they are, but look at what the loss would be if those schools disappear. And my next question for you, sort of, and still moving along in those lines, is how do we keep the confidence of young people who are looking for colleges right now and who are going to be scared to apply to these schools in case the rug gets pulled out from under them? Because that's a horrible thing to do to a student.
Well, there is no doubt that right now that's a huge issue. And one of the real concerns over the weekend was because the chancellor did this, it has put that story out there, and that could really impact and create that downward spiral of a
Right.
self-fulfilling prophecy. Um, I do think that if there is strong action over these next couple of months, then that fear, there's two groups of people right now. One is the folks that have been accepted to the state colleges for next year. And well, there's three groups. One is the group that was accepted to the state colleges this spring to go to our colleges next year, and they may be thinking about picking other schools for the risk of them closing. A second is the current students. Are they now looking for places to transfer to? And the third, which is the word I think you talked about, which is applicants, those would not start until the fall for this next cycle. And
Right.
so I think the sooner and more clearly the state legislature and the governor take action to say this matters, we're going to invest, and we're going to also get our chancellor and the board of trustees to be nimble with some of these new ideas. I think if we show that we can do that over these next 4 weeks to 6 weeks while the legislature is still in session, then I think if we do that quickly, strongly, and clearly, that will send an equally strong message that these schools matter. And I think, Pam, relative to what you said earlier, yes, 10 and 25 million at once, and then maybe 10 million for a few years afterwards in additional funding are big numbers. They are small numbers. When you look at even just NVU alone, it's talked about that the economic impact to that part of the Northeast Kingdom is about $125 million a year.
Right.
All the ancillary businesses, all the opportunity for employers to get well-trained and well-educated youth into their jobs. Then you add Johnson, then you add Vermont Technical College. I was thinking the other day as I was over doing my pig chores in the middle of the night one night, checking on whether the pigs were farrowing or not, it came to mind. This was over the weekend. It came to mind. It was about 3 in the morning. I was just checking on one of the sows to see if she needed a heater. And I was thinking about the folks throughout the Northeast Kingdom that work in the dairy industry. A lot of folks in Orleans County in particular, but other counties up there, or other people that work in like hands-on trades and family businesses who are the commuters to these schools, who are being told they'll close, we'll just move everybody down to Castleton. Well, there's no way you can work on your farm or in your masonry business or as a local logger and attend school in Castleton on the same day.
Exactly. Even if you had reliable wheels to get you there.
There's just not enough hours in the day.
Right. Yeah, and that is so important up here, to be able to have a day job and go to school at the same time. We are not the wealthy part of the country.
No. And, it's important to realize, in my opinion, when we look at where the economic sort of better off parts of the state are, whether it's parts of the Upper Valley and or Chittenden County and places close to Chittenden County that are doing reasonably better because they're near Chittenden County, the best thing we can do for those parts of the state is invest in the rest of the state to build their economies up. Because Chittenden County and, around Dartmouth and Hanover and White River Junction area, those areas can't carry the whole state forever in terms of the economic needs of the whole state. And so we have to be investing in our rural areas, keeping these institutions open, drawing people who might want to then stay and live in them and start businesses. And then if we put true broadband capacity overlaid on top of that into the kingdom and into the southern parts of the state in particular, we would actually be building that economy for the future, that people could make a living up where you live and so forth. So the state has to invest in that infrastructure.
And is that going to happen? I know you can do what you can do, but you don't dance alone, unfortunately.
Well, these days we're all dancing alone with spatial distancing, but it's an interesting job as lieutenant governor, because I'm no longer in the legislature, and I did used to introduce bills that some people may have been very upset with to raise revenues for the state, typically in a progressive way, which meant the wealthier would pay more, not working class people, in order to have the revenues to either build affordable housing, expand broadband, weatherize seniors' homes and working class people's homes that are, right now, so much money is spent on heating oil and energy in the winter that if your homes were weatherized, you could actually save money, and then you'd have more money for your food or, your rifle and bullets to go hunting or whatever it is you need to help keep food on the table. And whether the state doesn't have the money right now because the state hasn't chosen to generate those revenues. The governor puts forth a budget and of course has the opportunity to veto any bills, and the legislature puts forth their version of a budget and can pass any bills. My job, actually, I only vote when there's a tie vote in the Senate. Other than that, my job now is to be the parliamentarian of the Senate, sort of like your town moderator, but of the 30 senators, and keep things fair and keep the process running properly. But the state does have the opportunity every year discussing what's important, whether or not to prioritize things like broadband investment or the state colleges. And one thing, and then I'll wrap this part of your question up, that did pass last year, and some communities have taken advantage of this, is the opportunity for municipalities to band together to form telecommunications units to expand broadband into some areas. And I know on town meeting day, a number of communities around the state formed some of these collaborations, much like the VTEL group in the Upper Valley. And then the next step, and the state is helping fund some of the research into those possibilities and helping those towns organize. The next step is whether the state can augment the investment in the infrastructure, because the number I've heard is that to get broadband to the vast majority of the state is about a $284 million investment, and the state definitely does not have that kind of money. However, if the state puts in 10 or 20 million a year for 4 or 5 years, it would leverage private money to
Mhm.
get the vast majority of that built. And if we were to do that, we would both help the economic situation, we would help Vermonters with telecommuting to school, we would help develop telecommuting businesses. And right now we're seeing, of course, the inequality of education in those places where kids don't have good broadband and they're at home instead of at school, and they just can't learn the way that kids with better broadband can. So this is a broad, important issue that hopefully the state addresses along with the state colleges.
There are so many issues for the state to address, particularly for the disadvantaged communities like the NEK, and there are some other areas as well. Because, for example, using up here as an example, in Newport, we have a hole in the ground, we have a landfill right on our doorstep, polluting our lake and the watershed, and we have a prison but no resources for prisoners when they're released or for their families. We're not the only community that's struggling in that way. Is this going to be something that the state is ever going to be able to help with? Because until we can get the first step up, it's really hard to keep going, and without getting ripped off, because as you know, the EB5 program took us all for a ride.
Well, we have to be honest and clear that the well is not unlimited. And I know a lot of folks in the NEK have historically, sort of felt that with their votes and their views on how things should be done in state government and how big or small state government should be.
Right.
And, there's a big shift and opening in a conversation right now about what is the state's job in building the infrastructure so that private enterprise can thrive versus getting completely out of the way. And
Mhm.
on the one hand, you were talking about how the Northeast Kingdom feels neglected. Um, but people say small government don't go and, we shouldn't have government. So there's a difficulty there when the position is to not have government involved, to then say, but we want government money here to invest. So it's a catch
Yeah,
22 of a
it is.
conversation, and it's up to the people to decide what they want. But I do think if we were to start with making sure we kept those educational facilities going and adjusted for strength for the future, and if we invested in broadband and affordable housing,
Mhm.
those arenas would help build that economy that would give the state more revenue and more opportunity to continue to move forward on dealing with, for instance, the whole, and what kind of investment should be made in the whole in Newport, or what incentives could be given. But there isn't enough money to do everything all at once. That's for sure. And I think we have to be aware and prudent about that.
And I think the Northeast Kingdom is aware of that and is realistic. And
Sure.
interestingly, the issue with the college is one that is pulling everybody together. Ditto for when the landfill expansion came up as an issue, the coalition that formed around that was composed of people from really extreme ends of the pole, all of whom could gather behind something that was polluting our lake. The leachate was going into the lake, and clearly a lot of us were not happy about it. So there certainly are some things that do pull us together, and education is a big one because everybody wants their kids, their own kids, to have a good start in life, and they can usually support other people's kids having that same start.
Well, I think you touch on some important issues there. And what I think this pandemic has proven is that not all the answers are there on the left or the right.
Right.
If you look at what's gone on with mutual aid groups all over the state, local community action and so forth, that isn't big government. That's local people stepping up, being in touch with each other, coordinating food deliveries, basic needs to different people's houses, check-ins for certain homes that maybe only have one person, maybe one of our wise elders, and that needs just a check-in, but not a face-to-face touch
Right.
because of the risk. So you have a lot happening at the local level where people are pulling together. At the same time, we're seeing that different pockets of the state are more or less able to do that based on the economic well-being of those pockets, or how many people are well enough off that they can lend that kind of support. And so there is a need for state support in certain areas where the economy just isn't there. And so folks are recognizing that there's a role for government, there's a role for individual action. All of these are important, quote, left and right, whatever you want to call it. But when we face a crisis like this, people are willing to set aside their differences and really look at those commonalities. And I think everyone's recognizing we fundamentally have so much more in common than we have in our political battles and differences. But even within those political battles and differences, there is a reshift or a shift in some of these conversations about what are those basic needs and what are the roles that government can or should or maybe shouldn't play in helping with that. And I think broadband is a big reveal on that one with education. And I think that overall government investment in economic infrastructure and who gets it, is it better to have it be a couple of big industries that get that money? Or is it better to help a lot of small businesses so you can have a diversified economy? I think a lot of us would argue more grants or supports to small businesses to grow from 3 people to 15 people is probably a better way for Vermont's economy than trying to land one 500-person business.
Yeah.
You know, but it's an ongoing conversation.
I think you'd certainly get support for the invest in small businesses up here, because this tends to be an area with people who believe in self-sufficiency. Whichever end of the political spectrum they support, there's a strong value of grow your own, support your own, take care of your own. And one of the things that this current pandemic is doing is getting people to figure out how they're going to grow some of their own food. People who had grown it before, grown up growing food, stopped for a while because, as you know, it's a challenge to do that. It's pain in the ass. I was out planting peas today. It's both fun and it's not fun. But
Yeah.
there's value to it. And it's made a difference. Those of us who still had products, produce, potatoes, garlic, whatever, still left in our homes that we'd grown last summer, had a head start for some of this. Those of us who'd grown stuff and canned it had a head start. People who hunt for their own meat or grow their own pigs.
Well, I think you touch on a lot of things there. You know, some people have the land to grow food, some don't as well. But I think the planting of seeds and the harvesting of food are the fun parts. It's the in-between that, you know, sometimes can get tedious, as we know on our 15 acres of vegetables. And we do about 1,200 chickens, and we did about 40 hogs this year. And we have 13 gilts and sows that, well, now they're all sows after the next couple of days, our last gilt will farrow. But, you know, it is everyone take care of themselves attitude, but I'm also seeing everyone take care of their neighbors.
Exactly.
And, you know, I think what's really important is folks are starting to recognize that your neighbor, whether they're politically different, whether they are gender different, whether they are racially different, they're your neighbors. And I've seen incredible conversations in social media of folks saying, well, I go out for a walk every day on my road, and I'm meeting neighbors that were just up the road that I never even really met. I've seen them in their cars, and we meet from opposite sides of the road, obviously, and talk 12 or 15 feet apart. And we're getting to know our neighbors.
Yeah.
And so I think these are some of the social shifts that may or may not have political consequences. The politics don't really matter. But they're the social shifts that are happening with a relocalization where people actually are getting to know their neighbors again, because we're not driving 40 miles to work and back every day. We're right there at home and with our neighbors on the streets. And there's a real social value to that. But people also do need to make a living. And we are really struggling right now, having come off of what was supposedly one of the strongest economies ever, and yet half the state living paycheck to paycheck. And right now, really suffering because the unemployment system isn't working. So
the unemployment system is a disaster right now.
Right. Well, there's a couple things here. One is many folks who stopped working as part of the directive from the governor, they did their end of the bargain on the social contract between individuals and the state for the greater good. And then the state was not at all prepared for the onslaught. I'm not sure why it's taken 5 and 6 weeks to get to where we're starting to handle it well. Again, I try to work with the governor and the administration, but I'm not in the daily meetings, so I don't know why this took so long. I did suggest last week on Wednesday in a letter to the Commissioner of Labor, I said, why don't you set up 100 or 150, whatever number of National Guard you need, in the makeshift hospital that's not being used at the Champlain Valley Expo with desks with computers to take everybody's name, social security number, and address and get them a check. And Thursday morning, he and I spoke, and he said, we can't do that. The federal laws and rules don't allow it. And on Friday, the governor said, we're going to prepay $1,200, two $600 unemployment increments to all the people that are backlogged in the system if we don't get them done by Saturday. So I don't know what shifted over those couple of days, but I'm really glad the governor moved in that direction and got that money out. However, the problem is that only works for the people that have actually gotten through. There are still people who haven't gotten through on the phones. Yeah. And as of today, all the self-employed small business owners, many of whom are in the rural parts of the state, like the Northeast Kingdom, had no access to the unemployment system. Now, we have to do a little bit of ownership here. Folks have chosen to be self-employed and have chosen to sign the waiver that they don't need to pay into unemployment. And this is now the unfortunate consequence of that, because if you don't pay in, you weren't eligible to get it until the federal law went into effect and the state was able to put together the system to do it. And supposedly today, which is Thursday the 23rd, but going forward, the payment unemployment assistance is supposed to also be available to the 35 to 50,000 independent contractors and self-employed Vermonters. But that's going to also really gum up the system for a while. You will be able to apply for those back weeks, and everybody should do that. But really, if you're able to go back to work, now the governor's opened it up on Monday to the 1- and 2-person working together situations, I would encourage you to go to work, start to make some money, and then file next week when the phone logs start to back down to get the back pay that you deserve. Because you're not going to get through anyway on the phones right now. You might as well be working and starting to make some money. Right. But it is a hard, hard time.
And I'm not sure that people actually believe that they will get the money retroactively, so that they're scared, realistically, because the debts are just piling up.
Rightfully scared, but you should be getting the federal stimulus money, which also, if you got your refund automatically into your account, then you should be getting that federal stimulus money very soon. But unfortunately, 70 million of us file and get a paper check refund.
Right. I'm one of those.
And the federal government can only do 5 million checks a week. So for many people, that federal stimulus is going to come, but it's going to come later and later. The good news for those who are on the lowest end of the spectrum, they will get the checks first, and they're working way up the economic ladder. So hopefully for the most struggling in the Northeast Kingdom, those checks will be coming this week and next week or the following week. But you are supposed to get the back pay of unemployment no matter when you're able to file over these next few weeks.
So people clearly need to keep hearing, even if you're going back to work, still claim, still claim.
Absolutely, absolutely. And people can reach out to my office. It's just me and Deb. We're 2 people as the whole office of Lieutenant Governor, but we're doing our best to help people and to answer questions. And I do want to say every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday at 10:30 in the morning, I do about a 20-minute to half an hour issues update on the Lieutenant Governor Facebook page, and people are welcome to chime in or ask questions, and we'll try to get you answers as that goes on.
In theory, that's something that is live. It doesn't always work that way. So those of us who tried to chime in on Tuesday couldn't even get onto the show.
Okay.
It wasn't working. But
well, when it does work, you can go to the same episode and chime in. You can also go to my Lieutenant Governor website or email deb.wolf@vermont.com. Again, that's deb.wolf@vermont.gov, and send your questions that way as well.
Is that Wolf with or without an E?
Without an E.
Thank you.
Like the animal.
Yeah, good name. You at least are responsive, and that's something that I've heard repeatedly, that if people contact you or your office, they do get a response. That certainly has not always been true for some of the other elected people. How do you manage to do it? Because literally you are 2 people, and there must be an awful lot of us.
Well, there are a lot of people. We don't get to everyone, and I apologize. We also say sometimes, thank you for contacting us. We're going to try and get you an answer, and that falls through the cracks sometimes. Sure. Deb is amazing. I'm on the phone and answering a lot of emails all day long. we're just doing the best we can. And, we don't answer every call and we apologize. I did apply for paid interns from the budget, but we didn't get that. So the whole lieutenant governor budget is my salary and benefits, her salary and benefits, office rent, and office supplies. So it's a pretty tight ship. And we were unable to get those resources for a couple of paid interns, which would be helpful, but
I bet.
we're just doing the best we can. And we're going 7 days a week, 12, 13, 14 hours a day, which I know a lot of working Vermonters in the Northeast Kingdom are doing with 2 and 3 jobs as well. So
But you have 2 or
it's
3
no
jobs.
different than many people out there who are really working hard to try to make themselves better off and to help their neighbors.
Currently, you have 2 or 3 jobs. You have your lieutenant governor job, you have your farm, and you're running again. You're running for governor.
I am running
Let's
for
go.
governor. That's mostly put on hold. I'm doing a little bit of work in the evenings and on the weekends, trying to either make phone calls or do some Zoom conversations.
Mhm.
I don't know if I'm allowed to give out the website, but it's Zuckerman,
Website, yeah. This,
Zuckerman, FORVT.com. That's Zuckerman4Vermont.com. We have a lot of little webinars, little 20-minute conversations with people around the state about COVID-19, whether it's healthcare, taxes, unemployment, different language episodes or an episode for new Americans and how to get resources for them to understand in their languages. I interviewed Don Stevens, Chief Stevens of Abnaki the other day. So there's lots of little short things to watch. We're doing music shows and we are reaching out to talk about what's the possibility for the future, because there is going to be a future after this. And the question is, how do we rebuild and what do we want Vermont to look like when we rebuild? And we touched on some of those issues earlier. But yeah, it's a lot of different jobs. And then there's trying to have a little time with the family, which I've really not done well this last month because of the needs of the state. But I'm trying. We're all trying.
yeah, it's hard to maintain any kind of balance. But
Indeed.
that
Yep.
is what all of us need. And for those of us who have become homebound, but without having 3 day jobs as well, it has been an opportunity to take a breath, to learn some new skills, because most of us were not savvy with things like Zoom before, and to actually think about what do we want moving forward.
So I'll touch on that in 2 ways. One is my siblings and their kids now every Sunday night across the country have a game night on the computer together. So we're actually doing more together than we used to. But the second thing is, what do we do going forward is a big question. And I think we have a lot of opportunities for what could happen. And I think people should be presenting their ideas to the legislators and to your local community and say, where do we want to go in Vermont next? And what do we want our life to be like? And I think one of those opportunities is actually, some may like this, some may not, is that just like after 9/11, I think there may well be an influx of people to Vermont from other states, not temporarily as they are right now, but people actually reevaluating what's important in life. And so I think it's important that we think about, how do we welcome new people? How do we help them assimilate to the way Vermont is and not completely change to the way that many people maybe in the kingdom are feeling like it's getting changed. But I think a lot of people are coming to Vermont and sensing the value of local community. And we can help people do that as they move here and settle here. But it does mean there's going to be housing pressures. We need to build affordable housing and make it possible for folks that live here to still afford to live here.
Yeah, it is an opportunity in that way. And you're right, there are some challenges moving to a rural part of the country. Clearly, I'm not a local.
I never would have guessed that.
Really? You thought this was a local accent?
Isn't that the Northeast Kingdom, accent?
Yeah, it's just that little bit slightly off, just a little bit. But there are a lot of us with different sounding accents. I mean, I'm married to somebody from Brooklyn, so that's also different. But we moved up here 11 years ago, obviously, and have chosen to stay. And I think you're right that there will be a lot of people who are looking at what is it they want. And that is an opportunity to both bring new ideas and to absorb what's here, because again, it's that back to that word balance.
Indeed. I think there is a light at the end of the tunnel. We don't know when the tunnel is going to end, because this is an issue that could flare up again. We don't know how many people are naturally immunized now with having received the virus but not shown symptoms. So I think there's a lot of unknowns over these next 4 to 6 to 12 months, but we do have to work together.
Right. And I think we're just about out of time. So do you have a couple of last words that you would like to leave people with?
Well, I'm just really proud of Vermonters and how many Vermonters I've talked to across the state through even this electronic means, who are working together with mutual aid groups. The Vermont Council on Rural Development has a good list of mutual aid groups, which are just local, non-organized, not nonprofits, not businesses, just people helping each other out. Hungerfreevermont.org is an important resource for people who are food insecure right now because those monies have not come in. They can help you understand what the resources are, whether they're food banks, whether it's Meals on Wheels delivery, whether it's otherwise. So Hunger Free Vermont is a great resource. The State Guard and others have set up 5 food distribution situations around the state. I'm actually going to look and see if I can find my notes really quickly, because one of them is in the Northeast Kingdom on Wednesday, April 29th. The Northeast Kingdom International Airport is teaming up the Food Bank and the National Guard from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. with a big food drop opportunity, along with your daily local food sources. You can call the Vermont Food Bank at 1-800-585-2265, and maybe in the editing of this, you can put that number on the screen, but 1-800-585-2265 for the Vermont Food Bank. And again, Wednesday the 29th is the Northeast Kingdom International Airport, right by Coventry and Newport there.
Right.
So, there are people doing work all across the state in the short term to make sure people are food secure and supported. And then I think we need to really start looking at, what are we going to do about state colleges? What are we doing about broadband? What are we doing about affordable housing to make it possible for people to get the education and create the jobs and live in Vermont that I think everybody wants to do?
Right. Thank you so much for being willing to do this, because I know it was just one more pressure in your already overpressured life.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, and thank you for hosting these programs.
You're welcome.